So what my little piece here in the waste reduction and productivity here is mostly on the waste side, and really talking about a little bit more of a glass, which we all drink water from, and beers and our spirits and whiskeys and tequilas and etc. So this is just me. I'm going to leave it there for a little bit for the video, just so you know why the heck I'm talking to you. I've been in the industry for a little bit over 20 years. Started as a chef, went to culinary school, then worked around all of the different bars and hotels, etc. Lived in 4 different continents and spent last 10 years in Asia, mostly in Singapore and Hong Kong, where we developed a new distribution technology to really try to reduce waste in our industry. As we all know, we work in very old industry, distribution, spirits, wine, hospitality, which is really prone to not liking much of a changes. And so trying to really change something dramatically within our industry when it comes to an actual production of waste takes a little bit of a time in the planning, and have to have a really good reason for people to really get on it and try to help, because it's definitely a teamwork to get it done. So we all know that in our bars, in restaurants, in hotels, at home, in retail stores, everywhere we go, we buy beverage. There is a lot of aluminum cans these days, which is a good thing, because as a material for packaging, aluminum is definitely not the worst. But a lot of our wine and spirits, and we actually all as a humans prefer glass, is in a glass. The number there, 70 billion glass bottles. And when I saw it for the first time, when we started this research, I couldn't really comprehend what that heck it means. 70 billion bottles is just, it's hard to comprehend. We can all imagine what a shipping container look like, right? You've seen shipping containers. 70 billion glass bottles is 7 million shipping containers of a glass, which is used for wine and spirits only every single year. If you look at one large shipping ship, it's anywhere in between 2,000 to 3,000 containers. So we have 7 million of them. It's a lot of ships, that's a lot of containers just for glass. And it's only spirits and wine. It doesn't count in if you go into a restaurant and sit down and have a Italian, French, or Ukrainian, or any kind of a country bottle of water, sparkling or still, with your dinner. That's the same weight, same glass, which is used once and then thrown away. Well, a lot of people would argue about that, is that, well, glass is recycled. So therefore, all our bars and hotels and restaurants are fine because glass is recycled. The problem with recycling glass is 2 different problems. One of it is that there is really not that much of recycling happening as people think. America, a lot of states, is leading recycling of glass. It's only recycling 30%. Germany is leading, Czech, Slovakia, this Central Europe part is leading that whole fight against single-use glass with actually reusing the glass. So if you look at a water bottle here in Berlin, or a lot of beer bottles, they have a little white beaten piece on the 2 spots of the bottle, and that means that it's actually washed and reused. But because it's not really protected by any outer layer of a packaging, you can reuse it maybe 2 or 3 times or 4 times, and then it eventually actually breaks and it can't be used anyway. So the actual ratio of a glass production to the usability, even if you reuse it over and over, because you can't reuse it that much, is not that good. And so then therefore you end up with 2 options. I have to recycle the glass, or I throw it at a landfill. Throwing in a landfill is obviously the worst, and it's what we can do with anything and everything, and we got used to doing so. Recycling of a glass is obviously a better option, but what not people know or people don't talk about is how much of a carbon emission you create by recycling. And we are all talking about climate and what needs to change, and carbon emissions is definitely one of the things, and the main thing what people talk about. If you look at plastics, aluminums, certain types of metals, they all have a certain number which reflects to, if I create a packaging from the scratch, this is how much of a carbon emission that will release into an atmosphere. If I recycle that packaging, this is how much additional of a carbon emissions I will create and release to the atmosphere just by recycling, right? Because it creates it needs an energy to do the recycling process, etc. Glass, it has the problem that it creates 50+% more of carbon emissions to just recycle it compared to what I create by creating a new glass bottle, if that makes sense. So technically getting into a space where, yes, you're helping by recycling it, but you're only postponing the end of it. You're not really reversing the action. And the reason for it is very simple. As you all know, glass is heavy, right? And we actually got into the stage where more luxury feels when we have a heavier bottle, right? So all of the luxury brands are creating heavier bottle, more packaging around it, etc. To get that heavy glass to be filled and distributed and thrown away and then brought to actually recycling facility takes a lot of gas or any type of energy because it's very heavy to travel and move it around. Then you get it to recycling part of recycling facility, and there you need 1300 Celsius furnace, which we just talked about. The gas and energy prices are going through the roof. 1300 Celsius is a very high number to heat anything into. And before you can throw it into the furnace to mold the wine and recycle it, you need to get rid of the label on the bottle, and they are usually stick with not so good glues and materials, and that requires a lot of water to remove it. So if you combine all of these things together to recycle glass, you get into a spot where you're really not helping as much. You're really creating a lot of new carbon emissions. And so the whole idea here is that how can we, as a bar, hotel, restaurant, hospitality industry, how can we actually move away from using single-use packaging for anything, glass especially because it's used so much within our industry, but any packaging, and without being productive, without actually moving our industry to a spot where it's harder, right, to do our business, where it's harder to bring spirits into a country, where it's harder to bring liquids from all around the world. That gets us to the actual numbers, which talks about what we are actually seeing as throughout the distribution chain when we take a product and then bring it from one part of the world like Mexico or France and cognac to America, and from America bourbons to Europe, etc. Roughly, it's around 0.5 kilo of carbon emissions just for the distribution piece, which if you look at here, I'm not talking about the Grove Distill, because that's something what the brands themselves working on, and they're doing a great job. I mean, you look at Pernod Ricard, Bacardis, you look at all of the small guys like Avalon, they're really trying to make sure that they are producing good liquid, good juice. They're putting in a good bottles which are fast and usable behind the bar. They're putting it into good hands of a good distributors which are trying to follow a sustainability and environmental practices, etc. But they actually have developed a lot of techniques where making the product, making the vodka, making the rum, etc. in distilleries, they really cutting down on the carbon emissions by reusing the heat from the fermentation, using the heat from the distillation, etc. No matter what they do, that piece, those 2 points, only accounts for 10% of the overall carbon footprint for the product to be produced all the way to be used at the bar and then recycled. So then you're looking at where do we have most of the problem, it really is from the point where the product is produced and packaged all the way until it's used by the bar. It's anywhere in between 80 to 90% of a carbon emission of any producer comes from the actual final step of the distribution. We good here? Following through? The last piece here is that and this is coming to the productivity, not everything green needs to be counterproductive, meaning worse for your business. If you look at through the way how products are created, how they are distributed, etc., shipping and packaging, the two top layers in a bottle, accounts for more of a cost than the actual liquid. Now, if you're a small craft producer like Avalon or Bite or anything as a product which goes into a bar and it's handcrafted, mom and pop shops, etc., the liquid cost is obviously bigger because you don't have a economy of scale. If you go into the big brands, Pernod Ricard, Bacardi, Diageo, all of these, not that because they do anything bad, not that because they're cutting corners, but because they're such a well-oiled machines, they can obviously cut that cost down. Now, this is a very simplified version, but from the perspective of developing anything new within our industry, trying to be sustainable, it does not necessarily mean that it's supposed to slow you down or make your business worse. So a good example is EcoSpirits in terms of how we thought through that process, and it's that we are not only low waste and low carbon distribution, which doesn't degrade your brand. As you can see, it actually elevates your brand. It brings the bottle into the bartender's hands, but it just doesn't let it throw away. It brings the liquid into a countries in a bulk and repackage it into a glass again, but the glass is reused over and over and over. So that's all of what I just talked about. It's kind of trying to cancel out all of the negatives. On top of it, because we're saving on shipping and packaging and handling, we are capable of actually bringing the cost and bringing the profits on everyone's side a little bit better. What it means in the end of the day is that you guys running a bars would end up with a liquid, what you want, what you like to use, and it comes to you in a better price point than what it is in an original bottle. And so I'm just using it as an example. What it could be, what it means to be not wasteful, or what it could be to be an environmental friendly, but productive and vigorous in terms of what your business could be. But in the end, the overall side in our industry, we all know how many glass bottles and cardboards we throw away every single day. That was the one topic we looked at, what could be and how we could change it. Just an example, we worked with Raffles Hotel in Singapore. I'm sure that you guys heard of Singapore Sling. They make 1,200 Singapore slings on average every day in that one bar. It's one of those things where Carnival Cruise Lines and Norwegian Cruise Lines and all of the big brands come into the port of Singapore. They put all of the guests on the buses and bring them straight to the Raffles, because that is the one thing you really need to see in Singapore. That's why they make so many of them. And as we all know, Singapore Sling has a lot of ingredients. We've managed to work with Raffles and put all of the ingredients into a bulk, some sort of packaging for the pineapple juice. We have cherries, which Luxardo family worked with us to make especially large cans, which are 5 kilograms of cherries, so we don't have to ship small, tiny glass jars, and it's in aluminum rather than glass. And we saved 40,000 glass bottles for that one bar in one hotel every single year for last 5 years now. Obviously, during the COVID, it was a little bit smaller. But that shows that they haven't had to change anything. Singapore Sling is flying around, is made with good ingredients, and they were able to save 40,000 glass bottles every year since 2018. And with that, I leave it to you.